President Donald Trump renews his claims about threats to election security and integrity as the midterm elections approach. In a speech last week, Trump discussed foreign interference, non-citizen voting, vulnerabilities in the American election system, and reiterated some widely disproven charges. His administration recently released a trove of heavily redacted documents, which Trump says prove his allegations of voter fraud. Joining us to discuss the issue are Jacob Braun, Executive Director of the Cyber Policy Initiative at the University of Chicago and former Acting Principal Cyber Director under the Biden administration, and Stephen Maynard Caliendo, Professor of Political Science and Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at North Central College in Naperville. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with this issue of non-citizens voting. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin, he sent letters to the Secretaries of State in Pennsylvania, Nevada, New Jersey, and California. He claims that, quote, through preliminary reviews of the 4 states' records, DHS found there may be as many as 278,000 non-citizens illegally on their state voter rolls. Stephen, what's your reaction to that claim?
I mean, there's no foundation for it. I mean, it seems like that these were brought about by some publicly available materials. Up to 250,000 voters could be one voter. It's a federal crime to register to vote or to try to cast a vote if you're not a U.S. citizen, if you're not eligible to vote. It's very rare. It doesn't happen very often. The fact that President Trump took to a primetime address to do this is problematic, but it's also consistent with what he's done really for 10 years in terms of sowing doubt about the security of our election system.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me right to my next question. Despite all these, these years of claims, is there evidence of widespread non-citizen voting?
No, there's certainly not, and there wasn't prior. Scholarly work has shown that it's very rare. And then when the president was in his first term, he had a task force to look into this. They spent a lot of money and never even issued a final report because he dissolved it before they had a chance to do so because they didn't find anything.
The president also warned of foreign interference in American elections. Here's some of what he had to say.
Over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files.
Jake, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think there's a couple different things going on here. One is traditional espionage. The Chinese have conducted espionage on U.S. elections for decades, as many other countries have. That's not good. We try and prevent it in any way we can. But also, it generally doesn't seek to change the outcome of an election. Secondly, by most intel estimates to date, the Chinese really don't favor one political party over the other. They generally think that both parties are kind of against them. And they view that getting caught trying to change an election would have a worse downside for them than any upside of actually getting one party or the other into the White House or Congress.
So, if China and other countries aren't trying to influence the outcome, why are they trying to obtain election information?
Well, I think they're trying to obtain the election information for intelligence purposes, to find out information on U.S. citizens they're interested in, elected officials, intelligence officers, et cetera, et cetera. But what the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, multiple actors are doing is trying to undermine our faith in our electoral process and our institutions that really underpin the citizens' franchise with the government.
Yeah. Stephen, in 2016, you heard a lot from Democrats discussing Russian interference. Today, certainly the president and some other Republicans claiming elections are vulnerable. Did the politics around this issue, did they flip in some way?
I don't know that they flipped so much. I mean, what the Democrats were arguing about 2016 was that the Russians were involved in infiltrating social media to, as Jake mentioned, cause disruption, to cause us to have sort of a failing belief in our system. The Democrats claimed that they were trying to help Donald Trump win because they thought it would be favorable to them. There's not necessarily evidence of that. But I think what was dangerous about Thursday night was the conflation of foreign involvement in elections like that, foreign interference, which is, as Jake was sort of suggesting, they're not taking our ballots and changing them, and so the outcomes aren't changing. And so I think just throwing all this together as one big, kind of soup, and then suggesting that the elections aren't safe, I mean, I think we have to be careful about what the implications are for that sort of messaging from the White House.
Yeah. Jake, when you look at our voting infrastructure, what are the vulnerabilities there?
They're significant, actually, and several of the reports that were released after the president's speech highlight vulnerabilities that, by the way, we've known about for nearly a decade, but nonetheless still need to be fixed. And I do think both parties are at fault in the sense that Democrats often jump in and say, just because Trump said it, it's wrong. And then the administration wants to double down on election interference claims that have been debunked. But it seems like nobody's really getting after solving the actual problem, which is better security around our elections, and that's both of the machines and the government systems like the voter registration databases and so on that the elections rely on.
Yeah, I know this is something you've worked on quite a bit. What are some of the key remedies there?
Well, there's a few pretty simple ones, and all of them, by the way, are the cheapest options. Number one is hand-marked paper ballots, because at the very least, if everything goes wrong, a bunch of humans can go back and hand count every single ballot. So that's number one. Number two, a little bit more technical, but still less expensive, is open source voting equipment. So this would be where anybody can see the code that's in the voting machine or the voting equipment. Right now, the only people who see the code are the bad guys and the vendors, and we want everybody, including the good guys, to be able to see if there's problems that need to be solved.
Yeah, a measure of transparency.
Exactly,
yeah.
And that way, when somebody says that there's a backdoor with Venezuela into the voting equipment, then everybody can see the code and say, is there one or not? And be able to have transparency on that. And then finally, we really need to get rid of touchscreen voting machines because they cause incredibly long lines, which dramatically affects minority populations, student populations, groups that have a higher density in their precincts, which are largely urban and student areas.
Yeah, potential suppression of votes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I say, I think Jake had a really nice point there about the messenger in a sense, is that if it was somebody else making these claims or somebody else asking these questions, we would receive it differently. The issue is that the president started talking about election interference because he didn't understand how he might have lost an election in 2020. Well, he talked about the Russian hoax first and then 2020. And now he's talking about it because he's worried about future elections. And I think that undermines the real questions that are there and the real opportunities we have to do things better. So the messenger in this case does matter.
Yeah. Well, you know, Trump also used this speech, you know, she's advocating for this Save America Act. This legislation would require proof of citizenship, mandate photo ID at the polls, impose criminal penalties to election officials if they, you know, register people who don't present the necessary documents. What sort of concerns do you have with that?
I have so many concerns about this one, partly because there are barriers to people being able to register to vote who should be able to. And I think we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. This isn't the vulnerabilities in the system problem. This is the argument that non-citizens have been voting in ways that are disrupting elections problem, which isn't a problem. So it's barriers to participation, but also that last point you made about the election officials could be held criminally. We have a hard time getting election officials as it is, right? We have a hard time getting people to do this work as it is. And the last thing that they're going to want to do is put themselves in a position where if there's a mistake made or something happens, they're going to be personally responsible. I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about all the problems with the SAVE Act, but those are two.
Jake, we've got just about 45 seconds left, but you know, what is the barrier there? Why is the message not breaking through in a bipartisan manner that there is work to be done to make, you know, to make these changes that you've suggested for our election system?
Sure. You know, of course it's politics, and once politics gets in the middle of things, we generally tend to start fighting about politics and not about the problem. And I think that if both parties were to really kind of focus on actually getting after this the way that they could, because cyber is often quite nonpartisan, we could solve the problem relatively quickly. The solutions are not hard, and as I said a minute ago, they're the cheapest solutions out there.
That does have an added benefit there of getting folks on board. All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Jake Braun, Stephen Maynard Caliendo, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.